So why do we use supersets and what are some of their benefits? So a superset entails two different exercises that will have zero to minimal rest in between them. However, that full superset, so the full set consisting of those two exercises, will have normal rest times in between them. Generally speaking, there will be little to no rest in between every exercise performed in a superset. So think 30 seconds or below, and that's generally the traditional norm. The rest in between each superset will vary, however. So if you are performing a bigger superset that does have a lot of intensity to it or bigger movements, then likely there will be elongated rest times in between each superset that is performed. The first benefit that comes with supersets is that they are an efficient time saver. So obviously, if you take out rest times in between various exercises, then your total time in the gym will decrease. The second benefit is maybe an acute power increase. And now this kind of stems from the idea of post-activation potentiation or PAP training. So basically, PAP training is the pairing of two exercises. Generally, it will be one heavier loaded compound matched with a plyometric that will then follow it. The idea behind PAP training is that the compound is stimulating a higher neural response, more than what you would have at baseline without that movement, and then the plyometric movement being performed then after is capitalizing on this higher response. The third benefit is the potential metabolic benefit that could come along with supersets. I think if you're in a time crunch and you want to perform more of like, let's say, a superset or circuit style of training where you are decreasing rest times, then that could be one way to bump up the metabolic benefit. However, it's worth noting that if you're training in a traditional fashion and you're able to keep your intensity higher versus than if you were to use supersets and your intensity dropped, then I don't think the metabolic benefit is really fully there. I think if you're in a time crunch, however, like stated before, then there could be a metabolic benefit of using supersets strategically in your workouts. A fourth benefit of using supersets is the potential to increase hypertrophy based on the time under tension you're placing on certain muscles. Now, this benefit will be a little bit more in line for those folks who are on a time crunch and really want to push their hypertrophy limits further. A lot of folks won't have a lot of time to rest and perform traditional sets at the volume they want if they really want to maximize their hypertrophy. So using supersets is a great way to do so. And what this will look like will be supersets performed on similar muscle groups. So that could be, let's say, performing a barbell curl or a chin-up to a standing cable curl. The cable curl will be lighter. You're pushing those levels of fatigue even further, and you're really maximizing the time under tension on those muscles. When programming supersets in your workouts, it's important to consider multiple elements to use them efficiently and wisely. The first element to consider with programming supersets are your goals. Why are you even using the superset in the first place? Are you trying to influence your neural capacity and drive? Are you trying to increase potential energy expenditure in the time you have? Another factor to consider when programming supersets is exercise order. And this is strategically placing exercises in an order that optimizes performance. So basically doing something like a compound movement before an accessory. You do not want to perform, let's say, a heavy demanding compound movement right after an accessory where you might be a little bit more fatigued. You obviously want to leverage your energy to the best of its abilities. So creating a strategic exercise order is a must with supersets. The third element to consider when programming supersets is your intensity. This will stem from exercise order and your goals. Be very mindful of the intensity of what you're using in your supersets. If you're programming movements too heavily, for example, or you're not resting long enough and your performance is decreasing, whether it be on the second movement or later in the supersets, if you have 3 supersets planned and the second and third continually get worse, then likely your intensity is too high. So consider this when programming supersets. So who should use supersets? Now, this will vary from athlete to athlete and coach to coach because different schools of thought and programming will use supersets differently, but there are some basic guidelines. Recreational lifters, they can use supersets if they're trying to save time or improve on a singular adaptation when they are limited in the gym. Bodybuilders could use supersets to increase total contractions for a single set or target specific ranges of motion and increase that specific range of motion's time under tension. Powerlifters, they can use supersets if they're trying to get through accessories quickly, and they can also be useful for warming up for the big lifts. And other athletes, like sport athletes, can use supersets to benefit for that PAP style of training. All of this will come down to the program of which these athletes are choosing to use supersets, but those are some basic guidelines on who could use supersets. Long story short, nearly everybody could use supersets. It really comes down to the programming and the goals and needs of that individual lifter. When it comes to using supersets and programming them, There are multiple ways to do so. Some of the most common include agonist and antagonist sets. So this is performing a superset with muscles that oppose one another. The idea here is that you're able to train two different muscle groups that don't really have a lot of crossover, so you can really optimize what you're doing with each of those. So you're performing, let's say, a barbell curl and a tricep extension. There's not too much crossover between the biceps and the triceps there when it comes to just their overall use and fatigue levels. That's one common way of using supersets. Another way is similar muscle groups or a PAP style training. So the similar muscle group superset will include two exercises that are targeting obviously the same muscle group, and then the PAP style training will also be targeting similar muscle groups, but with a variation of intensity and velocity in which the exercises are performed. So this could look like a heavy loaded back squat paired with a box jump. Both are training the lower body. However, the rate in which you're producing force and strength will differ. The final way to use supersets and the methodology is upper and lower sets. So this type of superset is common for folks to use when they're training full body. So they're performing an upper body movement, then a lower body movement. And the goal here is to not limit your potential for contraction or force production or strength for the movement being performed. So by performing an upper movement, then a lower movement, you're not getting too much fatigue because there's not too much crossover in between those muscle groups. Now again, and always, intensity, exercise order, and the variations being performed will matter, but that is another common way to use supersets. When programmed strategically, supersets can be a very useful way to get through workouts quickly while also chasing adaptations you desire. If you want to read more on supersets and get the full rundown in an article form, check out the link below in the description of this video. We've linked our superset guide down there. Seriously, check it out.